Hi, my name is Ernest, and today we're going to discuss about the common good. But before we start, let's do a little segue and let's talk about villains. Um, you have you can also call them antagonists, in novels, stories, and superhero films. We have villains, different kinds of villains. You have the kind of villain wherein they just want to see the whole world burn. A prime example to this is Joker. There are villains who wanted to seek revenge for their family or for their transgressors. An example to this is Eric Killmonger in the Black Panther movie. Or you have a villain who is a puppet of another more evil villain. An example to this is Darth Vader, whose master is Palpatine, the Emperor of the Galactic Empire in the Star Wars films. But I'm particularly fond of and interested in this another kind of villain, and that is a villain who is driven by or who's motivated by their logic and their desire for good. Now, good is a hazy term here, but let's look at this kind of villains. Now, an example to this villain is Thanos. If you try to look at it, Thanos wanted the good for the universe in general, but his means is quite horrific, or rather wrong, outright wrong. So let's look at his philosophy, which was first introduced in the Avengers Infinity Wars. Although he was teased at the earlier Avengers film, he was first introduced in his philosophy in Avengers Infinity Wars. And what is his philosophy? Well, he wanted to collect the Infinity Stones to place it in his Infinity Gauntlet so that he could have enough or like this power to simply by the snap of his fingers he could eliminate half of the universe population, half of the life in the universe. And and the other half could live in prosperity. So he just wanted people to live in prosperity. What this means is let's eliminate half so that they don't have to share resources. Now, agree or disagree with Thanos, I strongly believe he is wrong. And I think many do. There's this moral compass that would immediately tell us that he's wrong. But Thanos and other kinds of villains, like for example Ra's al Ghul in the Batman movies, who wanted to destroy Gotham so that he could eliminate evil because Gotham is already beyond redemption. See, they seek out the greater good, but their means to seeking out the greater good is terrible, wrong, and but but they this kind of concept does not exist in a vacuum. It's not simply in films. Actually, if you try to look at our politicians, leaders in history rather, you would see that the concept of achieving the greater good is always the tagline of the most evil, most villainous leaders of our society. Uh, And this concept of dangerous good is very dangerous. Why is it so? Again, if you try to look at it carefully, there needs to be sacrificing to achieve their goals, which they believe is good. The question is who to sacrifice, what is good, and who decide who to sacrifice and what is good. And the problem there is it has always this greater good concept has always been a justification for the worst crimes and abrogation of personal rights in history. And it's usually the people in power who decide who to sacrifice and what is good. And most often than none, no, it has no negative impact to them. Just look at our history. Okay, let's eliminate the Jews, for example, Hitler. Let's. But if you try to look at it, no, it's because he wanted no he who wanted to gain power for himself and just because he believes that the Aryan race is the most important race. That's where the problem comes. It's a very dangerous concept. That's why if you try to look at our preamble, we don't use the greater good. And I'll give you a trivia later on. But let me read the preamble first. Let's look at the term that we use. I'll just read half of it. And we, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of the Almighty God, in order to build a just and humane society and establish a government that shall embody our ideals and aspirations, promote the common good. Now, this is the preamble of the 1987 Constitution, which the 1987 Constitution replaced the 1973 Constitution. I remember the 1973 Constitution was quite dangerous because power is concentrated to one person and he controls all branches of government. And they did, after the ouster of Ferdinand, Ferdinand E. Marcos, sorry for that, um, they decided to change the constitution as well. And thus the 1987 Constitution. And in the preamble, they decided to change certain parts. Um, Common good there is actually the term that is originally used is general welfare, which is similar to the greater good. But it arises from the concept or the reason as to why they're changing it. It's because it could be misinterpreted. That the goals or ideals of our society is simply for what? The greater majority. That we are simply serving the greater majority. And the danger here is this. For example, I'm a Christian or a Catholic for in particular. And we believe or not believe, but the data shows us that Christians are the majority or of the country's population. And we could simply disregard the religious freedom of other religions like Muslims and Buddhists in our country because they are deemed as minority. Or for those who have, or when we speak of majority here, probably the amount of power given to whom the society simply built to them, build for them. Like for example, the rich and the middle class. We simply would want to create a society wherein only the rich and the middle class would flourish, and we could always forget the rights of the poor. So the framers of the 1987 Constitution decided to use the term common good because they believe that we are building a Philippine society that is for every Filipino, for every individual that lives in this country, every citizen of this country. That our laws, the laws of the land, is meant to serve everyone equally without bias. Although that's far from reality, but then that's our ideal as a society. Now, what is common good? What separates it from general welfare or the greater good? Now, let's look at its history. If you try to look at the term common good, it actually finds its roots in Asian philosophy with Aristotle and Christianity with Aquinas. No? Aquinas, we're going to use first how Aquinas sees common good. He actually differentiated common good from private goods. For Aquinas, private goods are goods which could be uh, sort of consumed and diminished. So only one person could enjoy it at a time. Like for example, food, or in this case, a ham sandwich. If you eat the ham sandwich or you eat the pizza, you eat the spaghetti. Once you consume that spaghetti or that pizza, it could no longer be enjoyed by another individual. So it could be diminished. But he said there are kinds of goods that does not diminish, and they're called common good. An example to this is, excuse me, um, winning a championship. Everyone would be happy. It doesn't mean that one person is very happy, the others would not be no longer be happy because he has already consumed happiness. Happiness is something that could not be consumed for Aquinas. So therefore, everyone could enjoy it without being diminished. But um, as we go through this term, I, I'm gonna be very careful. I'm not gonna say simply evolve, but it has taken another level of meaning. So, the contemporary understanding of common good, there are two ways to understand it. First, it's an ideal. We understand common good as an ideal. What do we mean by that? Um, it simply means that the common good is a state of affairs wherein all conditions are met. Housing, fair wages, um, equal opportunity to quality education, ano pa ba? Uh, Robust healthcare, and people could participate in political and cultural life. So that no, every individual could achieve their full potential, and community in general could achieve their full potential. So if you want to be a doctor, you will be a great doctor because our society is is sort of created in a way that you'll become a great doctor. You will have no obstacles. Obviously, being a doctor will have obstacles on its own, but there are no external obstacles for you. Like for example, payment to going to school, or probably because you wanted to sort of every Saturday night you could watch a movie with your family, you could enjoy, your family would no longer suffer because you are being treated well in your work, meaning you get fair wage, and you work only less than 8 hours or 8 hours a day. So what I'm saying is that when conditions are met, meaning when these conditions like fair wages, and if these are met, people could live up to their full potential. The community in general will live up to its full potential. But we say this is an ideal because um, as we look at it right now, our society is not yet perfect. But we hope one day, our goal is that one day we will have a perfect society. Or even though it does not come, at least we have a vision. We're trying to arrive at something. But again, excuse me. But we also understand common good as a moral measure, a measure of how we would decide, or sort of a measure for our actions and decisions. So it sort of checks whether our choices, our policies, our institutions, no, our school, our when I say institution, our schools, the government, our church, etc., etc. We measure them according to this ideal, or does our institutions, like for example, is our school sort of aiming for the common good? Are there policies, like for example, one clear example is Ateneo's no plastic policy. You're not allowed to bring plastics in school because we believe that in order for us to enjoy our environment or enjoy our society, we need to have clean air, or probably still survive for the next 100 years. We need to take care of our environment. So therefore, Ateneo uses the common good as a measure to make such policies like this, or our own choices, personal choices. Like for example, my lifestyle. Do I want to have a car and simply own a car, and then I'm the only one who's in the car, and that car sort of emits a lot of carbon, or it will leave carbon imprints in our atmosphere that would later destroy our environment. So we use this ideal, or we use common good as a measure. Is it simply my decision? Is it simply for me, or for the betterment of our society? Is our policies, like for example, government policies, is it for simply for the general welfare, or is it for the common good? So it's also at the same time a moral measure. So that's what is common good is. It is an ideal that we hope to achieve. It is also our measure whether actions, our decisions abide by our ideals. But what are the key elements in common good? See, to say that we are practicing, or that we are sort of using common good as a measure, first, we need to have respect for fundamental rights of the human person, and freedom necessary for the development of the human vocation. You cannot say that you wanted to build a society where every individual achieves their full potential without by without respecting or simply disregarding their fundamental rights as an individual. And obviously, for every individual or for the community in general to achieve their full potential, you have to provide their basic needs. Um, it's hard to study. If you want to be a good doctor, you need to obviously eat proper diet. You need to provide food. You need to provide clothing for the weather, or obviously also for not only for fashions, but also for the conditions that, for example, footwear. You cannot go to school simply, um, without any footwear because that would hurt your feet, no? Or could participate in their culture, their identity, would have a good work. You need to provide their basic needs. And then lastly, peace. Obviously, you need to have a stable and secure community in order for every individual to achieve their goals. So I hope you've learned something today that is common good. And once again, I'm Ernest, and thank you for your time. Goodbye.